Hi everyone. In this session we're going to be concentrating on importing workflows. The specific workflow we're going to be focusing on is importing in XMLs that are connected to QuickTimes. I'm going to be using Smoke on the Mac to demonstrate this, but this could easily be done on Smoke on Linux as well as Flame. In order to demonstrate this, what we're going to do is we're going to perform a few steps. And these steps will hopefully guide you into being able to conform very successfully with the 2011 product line. Inside of my Mac that I'm using, I'm currently going to step over to Final Cut Pro. And here we have a timeline. Now, as I mentioned, there are a few simple steps to follow, and if you follow these should hopefully help you being able to do a conform very successfully. The first thing is you've created an edit in your Creative Cut tool. So inside of Final Cut Pro, here we have got an edit using material called Rory the Racing Car. The material is courtesy of Hullabaloo and Chapman's. In this, what we need to do is we need to take the timeline metadata and bring this into Smoke or Flame. The way this is done is by going ahead and taking the sequence that we're using and exporting out an XML. With this XML, you would set up, in this case I'm using Interchange version 5, and we're going to go ahead and export this out. Where I'm going to place the file is within the region of the media, so wherever the media is located, I can place this XML in this location. This is not really a necessity, but it just makes things a little bit easier when you're conforming that Smoke will search for the media within the vicinity of the XML. In this case, it's called Rory Master, and we'll save it in the directory which is very close to the media. A few things just to point out here. One thing you should try is probably try sticking to the same resolution when editing, as well as watching out for illegal character naming when naming clips, tape names, and any descriptions in order to avoid any conflict. Just to show you what's actually been done, if I come over to a little Finder window, we can see that in my directory structure here I've navigated on my storage, here is the XML I've created, and here we have some folders that contain our QuickTimes. Now these QuickTimes are uncompressed, but they could very easily be ProRes, they could also be H.264 QuickTimes, just to name a few. Now your media could exist on a network, so if for example it may be on a SAN, you can still have the XML locally and pull the XML and point it to the media on the SAN. Additionally, someone could simply just walk in with a USB drive or a FireWire drive with material on that you need to conform through. All these tools inside of Smoke as well as Flame can hopefully deal with these issues and sort them out quite quickly. So, once we've performed these steps, so first off we've exported the media. You can see that in this case the media as well as the XML have all been placed in the correct place. And we can now go into our Smoke. Inside of Smoke, I'm going to go into the clip library. Inside the clip library, I'm simply going to concentrate first off on a single view. Now, as I mentioned before, the whole importing mechanism has changed within the 2011 product line. This will certainly make your lives a lot easier. The first thing that you can do with the library interface is you can now open up networked libraries directly inside of your database. The network libraries I'm referring to are simply the directory structures that may be within your network. This could be your SAN, this could be your NAS, it could equally be the drive that has just been plugged into a machine. The way you access this is simply using a tool known as the gateway, and the gateway is accessible through your network tools. You come inside here and you can see that the first highlight that we've got is identifying the standard gateway entry, and this is usually a user temp directory that you have, but nevertheless you can see that I've got different directories within my file system. Now what you can do is you can simply open up where the media is located. So for example, this media I know is located over here under the Rory Do Not Delete project. Now this can be set up every single time you come in. The way this can be done is by defining what we refer to as a selection set. This is in fact a bookmark. You'll find yourself coming into the network window more often to go ahead and pinpoint directories on your SAN, your NAS, or your storage. To make it easier, you simply go ahead and you can save your bookmarks based on the project you're in or your username, if you always refer to media that is located in a certain location on your network. Once this has actually been defined, if I now exit the network window, we can now go ahead and expose out these directories. So we're not looking actually at a database inside of Smoke, we are actually looking at the directory structure that is on the file system. Inside you will see here is the XML that I've just exported, and inside we've then got the actual directories which contain the media. So this is the actual native media of the files we're working with. Now if I select this media, we can still go ahead and actually preview and scrub the media as well as play these files even before they've been imported into the system. So this is very handy. In addition to this, what you can do is you can take these files, and if I swipe to the right hand side, this brings up a preview window. And by just selecting the clips, we can then go ahead and play these clips through the preview window. We can also expose out all the different types of metadata. So depending on the format that you may be working with. So for example, if you're working with Avid MXF files, you would get all the Avid MXF metadata. If you're working with RED files, you would get all the metadata being exposed here. So a lot of information has been given to you before you've even performed the operation of importing a file into the system. The way the files are governed, the way the metadata is interpreted, is by a tool known as rules. And the rules are being defined through this import settings menu. So for example, if I open up this format and I choose the QuickTime option, inside the QuickTime option, we can define a QuickTime based on certain properties. For example, the tape name of these QuickTime files could be embedded in the header of the file. They could be coming from the directory name, or they could be coming from a file name. You could define these. The same thing with the clip naming. The name of the clip when it's imported into Smoke or Flame could come from the file name, it could come from the file header, or we could define it manually here. These rules can go ahead and be saved. So if you imagine perhaps one project you're working on QuickTime media that is potentially H.264, you could define a rule for H.264 files, or you could define a rule, for example, for uncompressed QuickTime media. The same thing applies once again to all the different formats. This applies to RED, DNX HD, if you're bringing that media in, as well as other formats. So the rules are basically a set of preferences that you can define. You don't have to define them for every single time. You can define a rule once and then apply it to projects that use the same type of rule. This will speed up the workflow immensely instead of you having to go and select the settings every single time you import a file into the software. So we're going to leave this with the default rules, but once again you can save the rules based on project as well as on your username. Once you've actually gone ahead and defined your rules, we can then go ahead and start defining exactly how the sequence, in this case the XML, is going to behave. So inside the gateway, I can select that XML file. Now, you can obviously give it a name, but you can also tell it how its resolution is going to be interpreted. For example, I could open this up and I could tell the system that this timeline needs to be a specific resolution other than the default resolution that the file was originally set up as inside of Final Cut Pro. You can also go ahead and expose out media in the gateway. You can select this media and copy the resolution of that media, and that resolution will then be applied to the timeline when it is created. So for example, if you're offlining at standard def, you could have an XML that has a standard def setting embedded in the file, but perhaps all your media for your final finishing is HD. You can force the XML to reformat itself to HD and then link it to the HD media from the sources that you may have. So this is the options you've got, and it's really handy that you can set the resolution you choose. In this case, I'm also going to just use the resolution that's in the file, which is currently set to HD, and we'll use that particular resolution. The next thing is dealing with the media. So in here, we switch to the Media Options tab, and inside here, we obviously will tell Smoke to search for the files and import them. So we're going to automatically perform these operations. Smoke will import the files, it will link to them, and you have a various different set of criteria that you could use to define how the files are searched. So for example, you could filter the files based on file format. You can also go ahead and consolidate the files on import. Essentially, if you've got lots of clips with lots of handles, you can consolidate the handles down. This is a non-destructive process. It does not actually change the files themselves, it simply consolidates the metadata. So if I wanted heads and tails on my clips to be only maybe 25 frames, I could set that up accordingly. The other search criteria that you have is basically how the system will find the files. So for example, in the case of XML files, I'm going to tell the system to go ahead and search for the media that I need based on the file names. Inside the XML itself, if you ever looked at it in a text editor, it actually lists the file names of the files that are being used as part of the timeline. This is one of the search criteria you can use. You can also go ahead and search based on timecode. So for example, perhaps I was using an XML or even an AAF, and I wanted to go ahead and specify the media based on the timecode. So the timecode in the media needs to match the timecode in the timeline. Then we can search on that criteria. You could search on tape name. You can also search on Avid MUID or search on specific resolutions. You can use one or two of these options or combine a whole series of them to basically be strict on the search criteria. In order to now go ahead and do the conform, it's relatively simple. To illustrate this, I'm going to go ahead and switch to a dual view mode. In the dual view mode, I can expose the gateway, so I can look at all the directories on the system that I've allowed the gateway to see, and then we can have a regular library in the database that I'd like to build the conform from. To do the conform, all you need to do is select your clip and drag and drop. When you release it, Smoke or Flame will go ahead, create the timeline, search for the sources, and actually link everything together. As soon as I select this clip, I can now actually see it in the preview window, and just to give you an idea, if I scrub through this, I can actually see the timeline as it would be working through. If we were to take this and actually load this onto the desktop in Smoke, if I open this up, you can see that we've actually got a conformed timeline. Now, coming back into the library, I've been explaining this to you in various different steps. If you were to do this without having to go through the various different steps as I've done, and you know exactly what you're doing, this can actually take a few seconds rather than a few minutes for me to explain. Now, this conform was relatively straightforward. I basically had a timeline with the same clips of the same resolution, and I dragged and dropped them into the clip library, so you can see straight away that I now have my timeline. But what could also potentially happen is sometimes when you're going ahead and conforming, you may land up with a clip that says unlinked media. And effectively, what this means is the metadata from the timeline has been interpreted, however, it is not linking to the media. This could happen for a variety of reasons. This could be that time codes don't match. This could be that there is a resolution mismatch. There are a whole variety of reasons why this could happen. However, we still want to go ahead and try to make this clip assemble itself using the media. Now, in the gateway, the media already exists. So you can see if I was to select all this media and I was to go ahead and basically expand everything inside here, I've basically now got every reel exposed out, and I can see there is tons of media that is relevant to this clip that is not being relinked to. The way we do relinking in here is to basically make sure the clip is selected, and we go to the Tools menu in the library. You will find a tab that's called Unlink and Relink, and inside Unlink Relink, you will find the relinking options. Now, since the media is in the gateway, so it's still on the network but not inside the Smoke database, we would like to go ahead and relink directly from the gateway. This means you don't have to import all the media in order to go ahead and create a relink. You can actually do it directly through the network. The way we do this is you simply define the criteria as to what you want to cause the relink to occur from. So in this case, I'm going to choose clip name. You'll notice as well that there is no timecode button in the relink option. This is because when Smoke does the search, it will always be looking for matching timecode. If the timecode does not match, then it will not relink. The other thing you need to know is that your media needs to be exposed in the gateway. So you need to have the media basically expanded out so that Smoke can see it in order for the relink to happen successfully. Now, as I mentioned, this clip has got absolutely no media associated with it. So if I was to select this clip and press relink, it will say detect the number of relinkable entries for the imported gateway. I click confirm. It then says, do you want to try relink for the media that's in the gateway? I click confirm, and then it goes ahead and finds the media. If it is successful, it will then bring in all the media sources, and then the clip that we were working with will now have a relink option onto it. And if I now load this up onto the desktop, we have now got another timeline. And if I put this one down, it says relink. And if I open this up, you can now see how we've created the conform. So conforming in 2011 is become a lot easier since the previous versions. You can very easily use the drag and drop technique which I showed you. If your conform is successful, then off you go. However, if there are problems in conforming or linking to the material, you do have a comprehensive toolset that will allow you to go ahead and search for the media, find it, and hopefully successfully relink it into the timeline.